Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Black History 365 and Inclusive History. I'm Mel Albin. I'm going to be the announcer for the show, and I have some interesting things to be able to share with you. Um, Black History 365 is both a unique and an important history, and it revolutionizes how history is understood and taught to a large extent. So, we need to start with a premise. What is history? It seems like a simple question. It is studying the past, right? Isn't that what it is? But exactly what is the past? And how do we come to know it? History has been described as four things: the study of people, actions, decisions, interactions, and behaviors. This is a broad canvas to paint on. To elucidate and to understand this concept of history, we need to ritually ask a question. What do we mean by that? And this is the way we have to approach history. First, the study of which people are we talking about, if we're talking about people. Second, whose actions, and why only these actions? Third, which decisions, from the myriad of decisions in any culture, how do we consider which ones to include and which ones to leave out, and why? Fourth, what do we mean by interactions? And does interactions also include exclusion as a form of interaction? Finally, behavior. Behavior of those are how do we understand the intentions when we talk about people's behavior? They're not here anymore, they're dead. So how do we understand what their intentionality is from their words? History is just not simple. History is elegant, and it takes a lot of effort to really understand an inclusive history, not an exclusive history. So when we make these determinations about what to study, who to include, which decisions to count, what interactions do we focus on, whose behavior, and who do we study, and also what choices do we have to make? Then what we include and exclude becomes very revealing. It tells us a lot about how difficult doing history really is. History is a lot like a lost and found. Much of it is lost in the process, and suddenly it is found when we do discovery. It was always there, but simply was left out. And the question is, why? Why are some things left out of the historical record and others included? It was left out because, and this is an important question. It's often left out because history is at bottom a truly ideological enterprise. So that raises an important question. What is an historical fact? And how do we understand that fact? Often the fact is at least three times removed from reality. First, if we look at sources, there are what is called in history a primary source and a secondary source. Primary sources are things like original documents, like our Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. What do these documents tell us? First, they were written by someone who is in his or her interpretation of an event. So if somebody wrote the Declaration like Thomas Jefferson, it's his interpretation of the event. And we can't ask them what they really meant because they aren't with us anymore. Then it's interpreted by someone who now looks at it through their particular perspective and cultural constraints. And they may write something about the Declaration of Independence and or any other document. Now it is someone's interpretation of something that happened. So we read this interpretation and it becomes our interpretation of someone's interpretation of someone's interpretation of an event. Now it's three times removed from reality. So what is a historical fact? It's not easy to identify. So actively recovering the past as facts may not be as easy as it first seems. So here we are at an exciting new show and history. Black History 365, an inclusive history. Why inclusive? We should all remember that women's history was until very recently a separate field, left in many universities to women's studies. It wasn't even part of the history programs. And the existence of non white people was recognized by historians only in the context of imperial history, by historians who only looked at it from the standpoint of colonialism or from a country that was doing what they used to call discovery. Discovery, we've now found, is not an accurate term because people were already there. They had already discovered the location and the geography. And all explorers did was actually find people, indigenous people, in different areas of the globe. But they certainly didn't discover. So we still have our borders, which are imposed by our institutions or funding authorities. Now disciplinary frontiers are finally beginning to be redrawn. And this is what is so important and new and what this show is about. This show is about Black History 365. Because the subject matter of this show and the textbook written by our hosts, Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Dr. Joel Freeman, includes the history of Black Americans, a result of the African diaspora. That's where an inclusive history begins, in Africa, and that's where it should begin. Black history needs not and should not be a separate history. We shouldn't celebrate it for 1 month as we do every February. It should be part of everyday life and woven into the fabric of American culture and history. Why has it been for so long non-existent or a separate history? Because, as I have indicated, the study of history is an ideological enterprise, and the heavy hand of racism looms large in our understanding of the past. It has left out Black people and their achievements as part of everyday life of what America was, America is, and will become. The 10-episode series that we're about to engage in will focus on Black Lives Matter. That's where an inclusive history begins. It'll integrate all Black lives within the context of America's past. We simply can't understand what America is unless it's an inclusive history, and that's what this show is about. To fill in the blanks for you, all the things that were left out, so that you understand the fabric of American history from a different perspective, an inclusive history. The Source TV radio network is proud and excited to have our new 10-part series, Black History 365, an inclusive history with our hosts and creators of the textbook, Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Dr. Joel Freeman. Please help me welcome, and I think you're going to really enjoy this show, Dr. Freeman and Dr. Milton. Welcome to Black History 365.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
Good to see you too. So, let's start off. But why don't you just introduce yourselves briefly?
I'll let Joe go ahead.
Actually, Walter is the trailblazer. He's the founder. He's the one that called me, and so I'm just someone that done a few books and have a collection, and we're able to collaborate in putting this together, and a wonderful team has emerged. So that's a little bit about myself.
Wonderful. I know Dr. Milton. Can I call you Walter? Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. I know, Walter, that you served in education for 25 years. You were a social studies teacher and as a high school principal. And you had an illustrious career in education. What brought you to Joel, and what brought you both to produce this wonderful work?
Well, I met Joel many years ago when I was a superintendent. There was a gentleman that wanted us to meet each other, and he kept, for lack of a better term, pestering me to meet Dr. Freeman. And I'm like, hey, man, I don't have time for that. But this guy was persistent, and I just succumbed to his persistence. And Joel and I talked, and we never looked back. That was years ago when I was a superintendent. and start working on this project because of experience that I had in fourth grade when my teacher attempted to teach Black history, and it was awful. She started with slavery, and it contradicted everything that my parents said because they said that we're descendants of ancient kings and queens. So I kind of challenged that notion, and my mother and father corrected me. And my mother told me that one day you're going to be able to tell this story. So fast forward ahead, after my years of being a superintendent, I saw that many students um, were suffering because they could not find themselves in the curricula. Also, between culturally responsive education and student achievement. So as a result of that, I began to work a couple years into the project. I had reached out to Dr. Freeman and share with him what was going on and say, hey, why don't you come on board and join this noble mission? As a result of that, we have a really powerful team of researchers, designers, um, accountants, and people that are just really dedicated to bringing forth this information so that we can make our world a better place to be. And I'm truly honored to be a part of this and to also lead the charge.
It's a wonderful work, and of course, as I said before, it's really very impressive and very important because it resets how we look at Black history. Joe, I know that you've had you have an extensive artifact collection that probably sparked your interest. And when Walter approached you, I'm sure that all those pieces finally came together. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was working with the Washington Bullets. I started as chaplain there in 78, 79 seasons. So from 78 to 98, worked for 20 seasons. And the players, are looking at me like, this white guy from Canada. We're supposed to spill our guts to that guy. Are you kidding me? And so it became a situation where I embarked upon a journey starting around 1980, just studying, researching, watching videos. That was all pre-digital time period. So you get the big old VHS down at the library, Eyes on the Prize Part 1, Eyes on the Prize Part 2, Africa Voyage of Discovery by Basil Davidson, and so many other video series, and then reading books and meeting Ivan van Sertima, and all these different things began to come together. And then as I was studying, I guess the way it hit me was, I'd be studying about Frederick Douglass, and I'd think, well, what if there's a letter out there or some artifact or something about Frederick that connects to him visually and tactically? And so that's where my interest began to emerge. And of course, when you're acquiring things, you have to know what they're about in order to know the value of them. So that's kind of how it all emerged. And then when Walter and I were working on this, about 1/5 of the images come from the collection. And so you have images in here that people have never seen before, just graphically that are very eye grabbing and inspiring. And so that's kind of the story behind that. It's
You
an
know,
honor and privilege to work with Walter, and he's been a friend for, gosh, now Walter's what, 25 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Absolutely. Time truly flies.
It does.
that's wonderful. You know, one of the things that when I read this textbook, and I have read the whole textbook, the visuals are so important because when you have words, you create your own mental images, but they don't always comport with reality. So having so many of these images in the book really helps a person locate exactly what we mean when we talk about different events or different people. So I think that's an incredibly important part of the book. And as you said, Joel, a lot of those images are exclusive and have not been seen before. I know, for example, that you shared with me that you have a recording of the great Jack Johnson, the boxer. It's probably the only recording known that he's ever done. So, there's so much in this book that is revolutionary, evolutionary, and important. And I'm glad I can have this show on Source Radio because everyone needs to hear more about what you have accomplished and what the book means. So I really appreciate that. Um, Joe, tell me about when you started to put the book together with Walter. How did you decide? Like the first 130 pages are about Africa. How did you make that decision? Because most Black history books don't pay that much attention to the African diaspora. So how did you two make that decision?
I defer that to Walter because Walter is the one that came up with the idea that we had to start with Africa. Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, it really went back to what I was speaking of before, because that's where my parents had really talked about our history beginning, since the beginning of time. And I thought that being an educator for so many years, you look at textbooks, and oftentimes they start on page 250, and it's the introduction to slavery. But we wanted to be authentic. We wanted to be organic in terms of our research, and really set a backdrop that had never been set before, and try to connect all the dots in the process. So we had to go back to the beginning. So we dissected the word Africa, and we came up with a term called a Kubalon. And then we studied from that ancient place all the way past George Floyd. So we wanted to make something that was relevant historically, but also relevant contemporarily, and tie those two together where it can make sense. It's exciting, with the QR codes and the images that we're talking about right now, the music. And so we wanted to have a textbook that was very unique in nature and one of a kind.
Walter, one of the things you're mentioning, still today, and it's really mind-boggling. Some people think Africa is a country,
Right.
not a continent. And what's really, again, unique about your approach, you draw from different countries within the continent of Africa to show the richness, of the diaspora and what culture was transmitted from Africa westward. And and like you pointed out, most books never start with that and never examine how these pieces fit together when we talk about the origins of Black Americans in Africa. So I think your approach is really unique and really important. So okay, so when you both decided to start on this work, how did you assemble your team?
That's a great question. Actually, I don't think that question has ever been asked. What happened? We wanted to tap into the knowledge and expertise of people that we've known, also people that had a proven track record, and we really introduced the concept to them. But some people joined us as we began to elevate ourselves, because they saw the worth in this product, and they wanted to be a part of something that was meaningful, that was going to be impactful for young people, and impactful for the world at large. And so I think that not only our people are bought into the whole construct of doing this work, but they all own it, if you will. And one of the things that we always say, that this is not transactional for us; it's very missional. And I think we all live towards into that mission.
Well, um, I think Walter, the team you've assembled is really interesting. Do you want to talk about any of the members of the team to give us a more in-depth understanding?
Yeah, we have it's we have so many. I don't want to miss any, but I want to just make a blanket statement and say that everyone associated with the team is amazing. They all bring skill sets that are needed, skill sets, of course, that are relevant, and still skill sets that are long lasting. I think that they have all bought into this, and we try to operate as one big family. We have a strong professional development leadership model that's really catching on to a lot of school districts. We have a design team that's really structured to make sure that we have the quality look, and that we put forth our information that's going to be eye catching, and also knowledgeable, of that work. We have a publishing arm. We have a team of financial folks, and so we have some amazing members of our team. We really do. We have a good sales team under great leadership. I'm very happy about the way that things have come together, and I think that the universe and God has blessed us in many, many ways.
Yeah, I noticed also your introduction to the book is by Andrew Young.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And I'll let Joe talk about this, but one thing that's remarkable about Mr. Young is that he gave us videos that the world hadn't seen. And he said that the only way that these videos could be shared with the world is through BH365. And we could never show it independent outside of that partnership. Joe?
Yeah, it's quite something that I mean, he could have gone anywhere. Andrew Young calling up whatever organization you can think of, and he chose to bring this exclusively through BH365, and we're very honored by that.
yeah, yeah. There are other people that are very recognizable on your board, and you talked about music, that you created music. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how the music part came about? Because I've never seen a history book that has a musical score that accompanies it. So that again is a very unique part of your inclusive history.
Yeah, it's there's a book that our team just put together. I hope you can see it with all the it's a song book at Black History 365 with a QR code, which I'm not going to show too broadly, but it's it's got all the lyrics of the songs in this book. And what's fascinating is that the lyrics were pulled straight from the content of the textbook. And so when Walter and I and the team were listening to the music, it's like, wow, that came from chapter 3, that came from chapter 9. It just was amazing how it came together. In fact, it's some classrooms are using the music as the gateway, the lyrics as the gateway to the history. And both Walter and I are big fans of gateways. What are some ways, images, music, there's elephant experience, all these different things that we've been able to put together. But back along, we wrestled with the idea of what are we going to do for music, because there needs to be at least one song that's kind of like an anthem, if you will. And that's all we were going for. It's just one song, initially. And then we found a gentleman by the name of Dr. Kevin K.O. Cates. And I put the doctor in front of his name, since it's a doctor in music. And he is just one of the most incredible people. Other rap artists have actually listened to the lyrics and listened to the songs and have said, I couldn't do that. Because as KO has mentioned, his stage name is KO, has mentioned, is that it's you have to almost be dispassionate, like a journalist in some place, a war-torn country, and there's someone dying over there, and the journalist is just reporting without weeping. And he said that as he and his team, his musical team, they had to go through, because when you're doing songs that include lynching and all the different other things in the horrific history, part of the history that we look at, it's just very difficult. And he says it's so hard because so much emotion was coming up inside of him when creating these songs. But he said in order for it to be learning, that they did it a certain way. And people who listen to the music on iTunes and other sources have said that this could become the next Hamilton on Broadway. It's that good because it provides an anthology of American history, starting with ancient Africa, ending in Canada, and everything in between. And so it's pretty fascinating.
It's interesting that you mentioned this, because one of the things that the book addresses is learning styles. Not everybody learns the same way. Some people learn from visual imagery. Some people learn from printed text. Some people learn from hearing music. And what makes it so relevant to the classroom is it really applies to all different learners. It's not just one style, not just only text. And and you also integrated technology into the book with QR codes, and you can take people on a tour of different ways to understand the message or the mission. And again, I think when you talk about an inclusive history, we have to talk about inclusive learning. That it's not just the history, but you've made it so people with different propensities, in order to understand a subject, can approach it from different points of view. We all know that it's becoming harder and harder for people to read more than one page. And for those that have difficulty, focusing and spending time reading, you offer so many different ways for that person to learn. So, for me, the inclusiveness is not just history, but it's actually how you manage to create learning styles within the text. So, I think it's wonderful. So, um, Joel, can you talk a little bit about how your work in athletics connected you to history?
Well, just working with ball players, I mean, it just their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. And what happens is that they're looking at me and they're saying, does this guy really understand? Does this guy really get it? And of course, there's no way I can fully understand or get it. But somehow I tapped into some things that just, first of all, unconditional love, them knowing that everything is safe with me. They can tell me their deepest, darkest secrets. It's not going to end up in the Washington Post Tuesday sports section. And there's some things I'll just go to my grave with, things that I know from players. And it just, so that, to survive 6 coaching changes and 3 GM changes, that to me is the biggest miracle of all, because they clear the deck. And the players, you don't know you're really in with the players until they start teasing you. If they're treating you with deferential respect, it's you're not in. But when they start teasing you and pulling practical jokes on you, you're in somehow. And so some deep friendships emerged, and of course they wanted to know what did as a chaplain, what did Jesus look like? I didn't have a clue. What did people of African descent play in biblical and extra biblical history? I didn't have a clue. And so that's what forced me to study. And, that's with Walter and I, both of us have a brain trust of experience and research. Even though it took 2.5 years, for us together, Walter was doing stuff way before that. And I was doing stuff way before that. And then it all coalesced, as we worked on this together. So that's just the working with professional athletes was a big part of my journey anyway. And Walter has his journey that is very, very rich and deep.
Again, I just want to spend a little more time with you, Joel. Then I have some questions for Walter. You have the Freeman Institute, and you started to talk about it a little bit, but I know it contains over 3,000 genuine documents and images, and you've also exhibited at a lot of really prestigious places. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that related to the book and how the pieces fit together?
Well, it's like you're saying, there's a lot of things that happen in the past, that help to enrich, and it's like the soil gets stirred up. Doing a couple of exhibits at the United Nations, over 1 million people showing up, White House, Clinton Presidential Library, in a lot of places in the alphabet soup of DC and other venues. But all of that, it helped to bring people in and help to impact me in many different ways. Because when you start talking about an item, an artifact, a document, and then it elicits other conversations, and it goes deep very quickly in many cases. And that's, in front of a bunch of, let's say, middle school children, you can talk about things, but then when they actually come up to the table and actually hold something, like for instance, I have something right here. This is a talking stick from the Chukwe tribe of Angola from the mid 1800s. And this was used, a chieftain would hand this to somebody. Whoever in the tribal council was holding this had the authority to speak. Everyone else had the authority to listen. And so it's items like this, when a young kid or kid of any age actually holds something like this, it makes a connection, a visual, a visceral, a physical connection that is very hard to forget.
What was it? What was the function of a talking stick?
Well, just that, whoever held the stick had the authority to speak, and everyone else must listen. And so that's something we introduced to the classroom, this concept. And then each classroom creates their own talking stick. That's all part of the professional development. Creates their own talking stick, and they might add a button to it, that reminds them to remain open with each other, a feather to have wings to get to the point, things like that. And then for 2 weeks, they might physically use it when dealing with difficult topics. And then after 2 weeks, it becomes a metaphor. Hey, Sally, Timothy has a talking stick. You know what that means.
That's great. Walter, I'm just curious about a couple of things. You explained a little bit about your background, and when did you decide that you really want to do a revolutionary textbook? I mean, when did the concept hit you?
I think the concept really hit me. Actually, it's been with me all of my life, number one, but it really hit me about like, hey, you need to do something about this about 7 years ago. That's when I really started thinking about it 8 years ago, and just said, hey, if not now, then never. And that's what the point that we came up with, and just went to work. But it has been an arduous task, daunting task to say the least. When we were working on it prior to Joel, it was long, it was tough. When Joel came on board, we had 12, 16-hour days, as he would say, and we didn't take any time off. I mean, it was every day, 365 days a year that we put our blood, sweat, and tears in this work. So we have a lot of work to do. We don't want to stop here because we have to constantly update and keep the relevant factor going. As you know, we have other grade levels. We start in kindergarten, we come all the way through, and I'm just excited about the potential, the future, the team, um, and all that we have to do. We have a lot of work to do, and we're still trying to get this in the hands of as many people as we can across the globe.
Yeah, again, just to pursue this a little bit further, when did you actually decide on the page format? Where you'll introduce QR codes, where you're going to have the elephant in the room, where you're going to have text, where you're going to have visuals. How did you go page by page? That's really, and how did you, and how was the work allocated? I mean, it just seems like it's such a complex enterprise. I'm just wondering how you work to put this together
Well,
and create.
I think that what we did, we developed text first. We wrote, and then Joel, he would beat and he would try to find alignment with the images. And then we wanted to make it a curricular item. So we brought the curriculum team in there, and they began to do it. The elephant experience was something, that we discussed because we knew that some of these topics were going to be hot, and to digest them, they had to be warned. And so that's our warning that this is going to be a hot topic here that's going to come forth. So as we were developing text, these other ideas were formulated in our mind, and we began to infuse them and implement them into the process. And so the process was seamless because I think that, coupled with Joel and I, we had people that were in concert with us and that were willing to provide input. We have ebooks. So that was a process, of learning how do we um, turn this textbook into an ebook and ebook format and all the accoutrements and the features that the ebook offers, all the elements. So there was a learning curve, but also it helped us in terms of getting creative. And so we wanted to make sure that we had information was going to hook and engage the reader, no matter what age or stage in life, that they were going to be compelled to read this, and not something that you just flip through, but we wanted to make it intriguing and appealing to the eye.
Yeah, you raised this idea about the elephant, and one of the things I found in the book, you present both sides of an argument. A lot of the issues are controversial, and you're not really taking a position. Although, as I said at the outset, every work in history is ideological to some extent because it represents the subjective decisions of inclusion and exclusion in terms of how the story is told. But you do present both sides of an argument. And that's really important, particularly in a classroom situation, because kids are so influenced now by social media. And social media first presents inaccurate information very often. And then the information is often very, it's pushed to one side or the other. It's pushed left to right, or right to left. So, I think that what you did was you really opened the door for people to take a look, for young people especially, not just young people, but anybody, take a look at it at a critical issue and be able to think through it in a way that doesn't push them one way or another. Was that your intention? Because that's what I see in the book.
Yeah, that you hit it right on the head. And what we wanted to do was appeal to the senses of critical and analytical thought and thinking. And I think that we, just did that. Joel, he'll tell you that we looked at Eurocentric information, Afrocentric information, and we said that we want to, if we aired at all, we want to err on the side of true-centric, really looking at every aspect and every angle of thought as it relates to history and the impact that it has on contemporary times. So we started the book talking about Sankofa, what it means to look back, to allow us to be able to drive forward with the right mission. And I think that all of those things came in thought. One thing about it, when you have the opportunity to just, close the doors to the world and focus on something of this magnitude, it brings out a high degree of creativity, a high degree of intellectual grit, and in a way that's going to really push and move us to impact in the lives of so many people across this world.
Walter, again, one of the things that I thought about, I remember when I first started looking at the elephant experience and going through the text, I started thinking of something that Groucho Marx said in one of his movies. He said, "What are you going to believe, me or your eyes?" and that's what I loved about the elephant experience. It's the eyes. It's not the me.
Yeah.
And that's what sets your book apart. And it is ennobling. I mean, because very few books take that approach.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Joel, do you have
Could I
anything?
check off that? Yeah, could I check off that? What
Yeah.
Walter has communicated is that just look at the hand here, and everyone can take use this as a metaphor, if you will. The thumb stands for uncomfortable experiences. And so just think of Uncle Tom, 3/5 of a human being, reparations, should we tear the statues down, scientific racism, can a white person ever fully understand the Black experience in America, Black people in the deadly dance with both American political party machines, and so on. There's over 50 of them in the textbook. And so that's uncomfortability. And if you just throw uncomfortability into a classroom, it's going to create chaos many times, and people canceling each other on social media and fights. And so we wanted to bring more of a healing approach, but it takes a schema and a process to do that. And things have to touch uncomfortability. And so the 4 other fingers represent, or a metaphor for 4 things that are in our statement of mission, is that number 1, to become critical thinkers and to really think things through. It's like in the movie Great Debaters with Denzel Washington. they went up against Wiley College, went up against Harvard and Yale and all the others, and they won. And the reason why they won is because they had to know 4 different topics. They had to know all sides of every topic, and they went at it. And then the second thing is to become compassionate listeners. 2 ears, 1 mouth. There's a parable there somewhere. And then thirdly, to become fact-based, respectful communicators. That's another touchstone to uncomfortability. And fact-based, very important. And then have people pried loose of their confirmation bias bubbles and their echo chambers. And that's why we bring both sides without trying to weigh one way or the other. And sometimes, like even should we tear statues down, we come with a third rail. And the third rail in there is maybe we should leave them up and put another statue next to them that can sponsor tens of thousands of educational conversations. And then the final one, which is built upon the first 3, is to become action-oriented solutionists. So, okay, now we've done a full 360, a spherical view of this issue, this problem. Now, how are we going to solve this? What are we going to do? And as we know, throughout the struggle for civil rights and other things, young people have led the way many times. So to be able to inspire young people to go through this process and then come up with solutions that will blow all of our minds is a tremendous thing to watch.
I have a question for both of you. When somebody in any grade level completes the text, in terms of who they are as a person, what would you love to see come out of it for anybody at any age that reads the text? What would you like to see come out of it in terms of personal development?
Well, for me personally, I would love for them to become whole, complete beings, because I think that our textbook espoused the 7 components of their existence. We deal with the cognitive, the way in which they learn, the way that they process information, and hopefully this information will help them to become more intellectually astute. We help them to digest words and learn the etymology of words and the meaning of words, and increasing their vocabulary and helping them to become articulate agents in many ways. And then the emotional aspect, for them to understand that the way that they deal with emotional, making emotional decisions, is to have the cognitive inform them and to kick in and to really help them have an understanding of clarity and clarity of thought. And then the social aspect, what does it mean for them to belong, and what are their responsibilities of belonging in a structure, whether it's school, whether it's home, whether it's a community, and what are those responsibilities of those young people. And then the whole notion of who are they, where do they come from, the notion of spiritual awareness, understanding that no matter what, God is in the midst of all that we do and all that we say. And then helping them to understand, finances, believe it or not, helping them to understand what does it mean to build wealth. We've written a chapter on that, Black wealth, and what does it mean to be a consumer, and how that sometimes can impair this notion of moving on, or moving out of poverty, or what have you. So I think that we push to help young people and adults alike to become whole, complete beings, so that they can have the skill sets to function in an ever-changing world in which we live.
I think it's a wonderful answer, Walter, because one of the key aspects of what you're describing is a concept that has become kind of a new fad concept, emotional intelligence. And what you're asking people to do is to reorganize cognitively, and to look and to really reframe emotionally how they understand information. You go through the book, it really does that. It forced me. I'm trained as a historian, and it forced me to look at certain things that I just didn't want to look at. I had made up my mind already, and and I think what the book does, and I think again what you two have accomplished is remarkable. It lets people look at their journey and look at the forks in the road and reconsider how they get to their goal. How do they find their way home? And it's very subtle, it's very genuine, but it's very compelling. And anybody that goes to the book is going to have to come to grips with some things they believed that they have to rethink. And goes back to my Groucho Marx quote: "Are you going to believe what I say, or are you going to believe what you see with your eyes?" And people then can reframe what they believe because what they see. And I think that's what the book does, because the book is so important in terms of the extra things that are in the book. We started to talk about the music before, and we spent a little time on that. Um, how did you decide again? You have visuals, you have music, you have text, you have elephant experience, you have QR codes. You know, when you started to think about the experience, how did you focus on any topic and bring all these elements together? Like, take a chapter, chapter one or chapter two. How did you decide on what those elements should be? Was that you and Joel, or was that really the team? I mean, how was that? How did it come about?
I think it was Joel and I initially, and then those things began to be refined as we went on. We had a historian, Dr. Marvin Delaney, that really helped us, put things in a way of expertise. And then the team, as we increased and grew simultaneously, they gave they gave different ways in which we can look at this. So we had a number of eyes that were on our work, and we were open to learning and growing and doing, because we wanted to have a product that was you know we could defend it, that no one could find holes in it, and we haven't experienced that at all to this date.
How did the writing this book affect both of you in terms of your own consciousness and awareness of the Black historical experience? Did it change both of you at all?
I'll let Joel go first, and then I'll chime in.
uh, I'll tell you what it did to me. There's a It's just by immersing oneself, going down the rabbit hole, if you will, in being every day 12, 16 hours, as Walter said, for 2.5 years. um, there's an immersion. When you go into a museum, you can see things and you kind of walk along, but then when you come to an exhibit that's an immersive exhibit where it engages every aspect of you, there's something more memorable, more tactile, more sticky, if you will. And somehow that period of time with Walter, he was in Texas, I'm in Maryland, and we're talking on the phone at 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 11. It just was crazy. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day, and discussing very, very difficult topics and how to frame them and how to approach them. And we just have to say that there was divine help in putting all of this together. It's like a giant hamburger. Where do you take the first bite? And it's overwhelming when you think about it. All the different topics, and people call us probably on a weekly basis. Did you talk about this? You talk about that? Well, in 1,248 pages, we could only amass so much information. And we're going to hopefully have more volumes of literature coming out of this that will hit the topics that we didn't hit. But my goodness, the impact it had on my life, it's made me much more aware much more sensitive, just aware, I guess, is like Augustine said in the fourth century, said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And, I spent 2.5 years just seeking to understand and seeking to understand some more. And it doesn't preclude the need to be understood, or doesn't guarantee we will be understood. But it's the whole idea of seeking to understand, I think, is a big part of the journey of every human being. But especially as a white man from Canada, it's the whole idea of I don't have a clue. I can talk with Walter, I can talk with somebody else, I can. Even John Howard, back in 1960, he wrote a book called Black Like Me. He had the awareness that 6 months later, it was all going to be gone. And so even his experience was not adequate to understand. So it's just, I'm here as a learner, 2 ears, 1 mouth, and just, standing with Walter. Walter's the trailblazer, and I defer to him. In fact, some topics that we were talking about, I just say, Walter, whatever you say, this is what we're going to do, because it's not my experience in America here, the Black experience, and so somehow, some way, we've survived all those topics and discussions and everything else, and here we are as friends and as individuals that are seeking to help and to encourage other people.
Walter, how did the experience change you at all?
Well, it evoked a lot of emotions that I didn't think that I had inside of me. It did. It was painful, to be honest with you, and it caused me to not only look at my life differently, but the lives around me, and to really make sense out of things that I never paid attention to.
Hmm.
I think that it helped me grow a lot in terms of being more sensitive to things that I may have overlooked in the past, and it made me more aware. And so it allowed me to understand that not only are we on the precipice of something great, this has become my life work, to be honest with you. It's something that I'm only becoming interested in, other than the love of family and things of that nature. But when you ask God to sit or to find your purpose, and then you find yourself immersed in the seat of your purpose, you realize that's what you were put on earth to do. And that's where I am right now.
Yeah, I think, I've written books, and no matter what you're writing, it is transformative. You aren't the same when you finish at the other end of the book. It changes you and changes how you think about things. So I was just wondering on a personal level, and I'm glad both of you answered that exactly. How this book really impacted your lives. Where is the book being used right now? You want to talk about that a little bit so our audience can have some understanding. And by the way, we have almost 4,000 people tuning in.
Wow. Hello, everyone.
Yes. Say hello to everybody.
Right. Well, our book is being used in approximately 250 plus.
You cut out briefly.
Yeah, about 250 school districts across the country, a number of colleges and universities. Our book lies in the homes of many people across the country, and we just have so much upside to what we're trying to accomplish. And our goal is to really have an international connection at some point in terms of getting our work over there. I say over there, I'm talking about other parts of the world.
Yeah. Joel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's something that as people, trying to explain this book or the whole curriculum on Zoom or StreamYard, wherever we're on Facebook or however people are watching this, is like trying to give a haircut over the phone. It's just impossible. And so we hope that as people engage with this, either through the ebook or physically have this book in their hands, that it will be something. I mean, we're getting reports of people that they have it on in their library or on their coffee table, and every morning they're opening up and they're going page by page and just going through the entire book in that manner. And that brings great joy to our hearts, because especially those of us who are of a lighter hue, it's just really warming my heart when I talk with people who are Caucasian, Asian, and others they're reading this book, and I'm just thinking, wow, what a wonderful opportunity for them to expand their minds. And as Walter talked about pain, there's pain in all of this, and it's something that that hopefully this will help to bring healing. It's like a ratchet wrench. You got to do the click, click, click before you can tighten or loosen the bolt. And many of us, we don't want to do the click, click, click. We just want to keep moving with our lives. There's so many things calling and pulling at us. But I think if we could have a whole segment of our country and the world just pause and go through something like this, and to begin to learn and understand or seek to understand, I just think that it can slow everything down, and just to get people together one to one and start talking about things that are painful, doing that click, 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 and just seeing what can emerge in our society, in our culture at large. But it all starts one-on-one, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It's the hard work is what people try to avoid at all costs. And they want, and more because of the internet and cell phones, and now even AI. People want the answer fast. They don't want to have to work through the process of getting the right answer, and that's a
And it would be
real
really
issue.
It'd be really
Yeah.
cool if two people who want to dive deeper in their friendship or relationship, if both of them get a copy of the textbook, and then they start reading it, and then maybe meet every Tuesday at 11:30 at Panera's Bread or whatever, and discuss what they have been reading. I think that can really help to bring more civility and kindness and character and integrity into our society.
I think so too. In many ways, the book goes beyond the Black experience. It's an educational experience for everybody in how to think, and how to reassess, and how to value your life and other people's lives. I have another maybe question. It's maybe a difficult one. Um, Joel, if there was one fact that you learned from doing this book that you didn't know, that kind of was a mind-blowing experience, what would that be?
Well, I think it was more of a relational thing, just learning from Walter, and because most times when people let's say cross culturally start talking about things, it's just about sports. Hey, how who won Super Bowl, or who won a game or something like that, or the weather, and some will even delve into religion. But it's the whole idea of taking a deep dive with my brother Walter, and learning from him, and hearing his pain, and hearing how he's processing things. I think that was probably one of the bigger takeaways. Historically, that hits the head. But something about the relationship with Walter and walking through very difficult conversations, and we still have them, and dealing with those issues has really made an impact on my life, and it's in a profound way, and it's hard to even put into words.
You know, that's a great answer. And I'm curious, Walter, just to reverse the question and have you answer Joel. What did you learn from a Canadian white guy doing this process?
Well, I learned a lot. I learned that Joel has deep knowledge. He's very bright, very articulate, and I learned that we have to look beyond the exterior, and we have to find the human experience in life. And I think that that's what really taught me, because, like I told Joel, we've had very candid, open conversations about trust, and where I am with trust, and things that have happened to me on a personal level, and he helped me to understand that sometimes we have to look at things case by case and not a blanket look.
I think that's really what you're both saying about each other, and I think that's wonderful. Let me ask you the same question I asked Joel. Yeah, I mean, you've been an educator, you've been involved with history. What did you learn as an important fact from your research doing this book that was either transformative or something that was mind blowing that you didn't know until you started engaging in this work?
Well, one of the things that was intriguing to me, and it made me look a little further, in this whole notion of Uncle Tom versus Sambo. And oftentimes you hear people in the black community say Uncle Tom, and that's someone who is not, black enough, who's not pro-black, or what have you. But once we start peeling back the layers, Uncle Tom was opposite of the depiction that many people have learned about, thought about rather. He was someone who really cared about black people. He would take lashes. He would give his cotton. He would do anything to uplift his culture and his ethnicity. And so that was really, really intriguing, to go deep in the surface, and then looking at this whole notion of the Willie Lynch letter and where that really came from, and how people were really stuck on believing the narrative that was placed with that, and it was all wrong.
It's interesting you mentioned Uncle Tom. When Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, later in life, she wrote a letter to Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, and she wrote that no one really ever understood who Uncle Tom really was.
Hmm.
And I think in some ways, I think either she grew over time after she wrote the book, but I think she came to a similar conclusion that people were misinterpreting, that particular person because he stood for so much that was good in an environment that was so repressive. And he took on the responsibility, and he often took on the pain of other people, and was never seen that way. As you pointed out, he was always seen as somebody who was supplicating to a white slaveholder.
Mhm.
And so she wrote that letter. When I read that, I was so taken by that she said nobody ever understood the character. So I think what you're revealing about your learning experience, I think is really important. And I think that again, I wanted to explore the book from the standpoint of both you, Walter, and Joel, and first how you thought about creating this book, and second how the book recreated both of you. And I think that's what I wanted our listeners to know, because starting next week, we're going to jump right into the history and let people really see what we're talking about here, in real terms. So, I think this has been a really great educational experience for people to see the two authors and to understand their journey in creating a remarkable work that I think everyone really should have at their coffee table, for sure. Um, so, before we could wrap up, is there anything that Walter, that I've missed or that you want to talk about as an introduction to Black History 365 and inclusive history?
No, I just want to thank you for being patient with us. I know that this has been a conversation that had taken place months ago, and I just want to thank you. And we're looking forward to a journey with this continuing conversations, and hopefully we can begin to incite so many people across the country to get involved in helping to bring truth about, so that we all can have clarity and we can be better than we are.
That's great. And Joel, what do you have to leave everybody
Yeah, I
with
just
today?
want to thank you for your perseverance, for your passion, Mel, and also for those in our listening audience. I really want to encourage you to, if you want to learn more, you can see them on our lapel or on our hats and everything is BH365. Just put a .org on the end of it, bh365.org, not the com, the org, and just it'll take you to our website. You can meet the team. You can understand about the resources and where we're going in the future, and some of the backstory also But it's just want to thank each one who's watching, listening, however you're consuming this, and experiencing it. And Mel, really appreciate you and all that you're doing with Source Radio, and God bless you.
Thank you. I appreciate both of you very much. And, you know, for everybody tuning in, we'll be back next week at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we'll be looking at the first chapter of Black History 365. And when you start to go on this journey, you'll want to get yourself a copy if you don't have one already. So again, thanks everybody, and we'll see you all, you know, next week.
Thank you, Mel. Take care.
Thank you.